Shadow Minister Lloyd Russell-Moyle.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The opposition will not be opposing this regulation today, but we would like to place on record our disappointment at a number of missed opportunities. There is really two elements to this statutory instrument: the plastics and the single use. This regulation deals only really with removing the plastics and doesn't attempt to deal or solve the problem of our single-use economy that we need to tackle. It fails to recognise waste hierarchy of reduction first and just aims at legislating in a piecemeal way, one item after another. Of course, we agree that plastics have become unsustainable. In 1950, we produced 1.7 million tonnes, and now we produce 350 million tonnes. The Minister has already talked about the number of items, particularly that we produce, including the 1.8 billion plastic-stemmed cotton buds, of which 10% are flushed down the toilets, leaving a devastating impact on marine life, when some inevitably get out of the system. I will do.
I'm very grateful for him giving way. He and I represent opposite ends of the same city. Being a coastal city, we are on the receiving end of some of this rubbish and disposable plastic as it washes up on the beaches. Do not agree with me. This is a very important step forward, but it is a step forward, and there's a long way to go in order to clean up the beaches that he and I represent.
I totally agree, and we both will have been on beach cleanups and seen the awful amount of rubbish that is either left there or washed up. Look, with the work of nature documentaries like Blue Planet, environmental organisations like Friends of the Earth, Keep Britain Tidy, Surfers Against Sewage and others, the public mood has shifted dramatically on plastics. Look, I remember in 2002, at the World Summit on Sustainable Development, us talking about not being able to garner public support for action on plastics. How things have changed, and that is to be celebrated. And that's why, of course, the government's been able to pledge in their 25-year environment plan to eliminate avoidable plastics by 2040. But can I ask the Minister in her summing up if she will set interim targets for this plan, and whether she will bring forward further plans to demonstrate how she will achieve that overall target? Because without milestones, there is a danger that we won't realise we are off course before it is too late. I would like to hear from the Minister what assessment her department has made on the impact of COVID and the use of plastics. Companies like Just Eat and Deliveroo are reporting huge increases in sales. And myself, I've seen restaurants where they were no longer using plastics and they now have returned to plastic items. Whilst, of course, we recognise there's a public health emergency, we do need to do all we can to lower transmissions whilst ensuring that businesses have the confidence and knowledge of risks of items. Look, let's return to the age-old, centuries-old idea of a washable spoon rather than a paper or plastic or wooden stirrer. It doesn't seem beyond me that the wit of man to return to something that we've used for a very long time. Yes. On the issues, on proper cutlery, I hear lots of support. Look, on the issue of single use, to highlight the problem, in 2018, McDonald's UK faced a huge public backlash due to the images of their distinctive striped plastic straws on picturesque beaches around the world. And they made a move to plastic straws. Laudable, we would all say. Fantastic. But today, they use 1.8 million paper straws a day. That is 675 million a year. And the tragedy is that these straws can't be fully recycled, so they end up being incinerated or adding to landfill or even getting into our seas, the very thing that they were meant to prevent. Now, replacing one dangerous product with a slightly less dangerous product or energy exhausting product defeats the point, when the reality is most people don't need to use plastic straws. We can move away from the idea of unnecessary consumption. Huge numbers of supermarkets and food outlets have already moved away from plastics to wooden or compostable cutlery, but these too end up in incineration. And as we know, incineration in this country has a particularly poor energy generation ratio compared to our other European countries. DEFRA's own impact assessment on this regulation has assumed that plastics will be replaced on a like-for-like basis. So while we are pleased to see the government trying to eliminate plastics, it is very disappointing to see this missed opportunity not to tackle the problem of single use. The government is putting themselves on the back of a ban on plastics the government is patting themselves on the back because of a ban on 3 items of plastics when we need to shift our throwaway culture. We urgently need extended producer responsibility scheme that is being considered in the European Union, and we should be taking the lead. Such programmes put an obligation on the producer to create more sustainable products. It incentivises companies that are doing the right thing as well as disincentivising the wrong thing. When will we see the plastics bottle deposit scheme actually introduced in this place, and when will we see it reflective of the material used, not just a one-size-fits-all model that unfortunately they've adopted in Scotland? Fast fashion and the inability to repair has led not just to straws and cotton buds being thrown away, but almost everything we consume. We are creating and destroying at alarming rates. And unless we I will do.
To take the returnable plastic bottle option a stage further, to make that happen, we need to have the cooperation of the giant supermarkets and similar. Does he feel that that would be a way forward to try and make it happen?
It is. I was on a phone call actually with the honourable gentleman across the way from me earlier today, and many of the producers were saying they welcomed and they wanted to move towards that sort of scheme. So I was very pleased to hear that. We are creating and destroying, as I've said, at alarming rates, but we must design a more circular economy. So where is the government on the right to repair? Another issue that is now being talked about globally, the right to be able to repair items rather than throw them away, whether they be electrical items or they be composite plastic items. The government is also a signatory to the Sustainable Development Goals, and number 12 being the implementation of a 10-year framework for programmes for sustainable consumption and production. And it says that developed countries must take the lead. So what lead has DEFRA made on changing production patterns rather than just this particular regulation? I would contend that simply banning plastics, although a welcome step, is not enough in creating sustainable production patterns as agreed by our international obligations. And finally, I would like to ask the Minister some specific questions about the regulation's implementation. What guidelines will be made to local authorities on the enforcement of this regulation? What resources will be given to local authorities to ensure that these regulations are enforced? Will there be an annual reporting of the compliance visits, on the problems found, and on the responses to complaints from the public about unlawful retailing of straws and other plastic products? And finally, when will the government bring forward their plan for an extended producer responsibility rather than piecemeal SIs? Madam Deputy Speaker, as we face a climate and ecological crisis, we must stop making piecemeal changes. We must have some hard conversations about changing corporate and consumer behaviour. Our short-term convenience must not come at the cost of our planet and future generations. Thank you.
Steve Double.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it is my pleasure to stand and very much speak in support of these measures here before us today. And I speak as the chairman of the all-party parliamentary group for ocean conservation. This SI before us today does mark another important step forward in our fight against plastic waste. And to take on board some of the comments of the opposition shadow minister, I think we all recognise that there is more to do. No one is pretending for a moment that this marks the end of our fight against plastic waste, but it is an important step, and it's something that I believe has been talked about for some time. It does have the support generally of the public, and it's absolutely right that at this moment we bring forward these measures to address one of the sources of a great deal of the plastic waste that we see in our society, because there is an urgent and pressing need to really get to grips with the issue of plastic waste. I think it's right to acknowledge the progress that this government has already made in this issue of the plastic bag charge that has resulted in billions of fewer plastic bags in the system, the microbead ban, which is very welcome. I would also echo the comments about the deposit return scheme, and I think that will be another important step forward in this fight. But this is a government that has taken this issue very seriously and, when appropriate, has come forward with measures to address this issue, and I'm sure that will continue, that today will not be the end of that. I want to place on record my thanks and the acknowledgement to a number of organisations in Cornwall particularly who have really campaigned against these measures to ban plastic straws and these other items, particularly Surface Against Sewage, which I have the great pleasure of working closely with, who for 30 years now have been leading the campaign in our fight against the pollution in our oceans, and the Final Straw campaign in Cornwall, which has campaigned heavily on this. Because, in Cornwall we do see the impact of plastic waste right on our doorsteps, as would the tens of thousands of people around the country who take part in beach cleans every year now. We know that too much of the plastic waste in our society ends up in our oceans and on our coast. And these measures brought forward today will certainly help in reducing that and making the job of those of us who participate in beach cleans regularly an awful lot easier. The statistic that I continue to quote is that it is predicted that if we don't take drastic action by the year 2050, there will be more plastic than fish in our oceans, and that's something that we cannot allow to happen. And it is steps like those before us today that will help in making sure that that doesn't happen. So very much welcome these measures that are before us today, and believe that they are sensible. I also welcome the exceptions, the very sensible exceptions that are in this SI for medical and other appropriate settings to allow plastic items to be used when it is deemed appropriate. While I've got the Minister's attention, there's just something else I'd like to mention, because whilst I absolutely welcome the measures that we are considering today, surely now is the time to now take a look at a couple of other things that we need to ban. One is sky lanterns and the other is balloon releases. I know that there is a great deal of concern around these. These matters were last considered in 2013, and I would just like to put on record that now that we've banned plastic straws and cotton buds and stirrers, surely now is the time to go and ban sky lanterns and ban balloon releases, because they do untold damage to our environment. They can damage property, they do a great deal of damage to wildlife and indeed farm animals, and surely now is the moment to, once we've got this issue put to bed, to come forward with further measures that will take those items out of the system as well and stop them polluting our environment. So I thank the Minister for the work that she's done on these regulations. Very much welcome the measures being put forward today, and very much happy to wholeheartedly support them.
Alistair Carmichael.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I rise just to make a very few brief words in support of the introduction of these measures, and congratulate the Minister on bringing them forward. She and I campaigned on this issue on many occasions when she was on the backbenches, so it's good to see her having the opportunity to bring them forward now while she's in government. Of course, the territorial application of these regulations is limited to England and Wales, but as others have observed, so much of this plastic waste ends up in the sea, and the sea, of course, joins us all. So we are as likely to find them on the beaches in Orkney and Shetland as we would be in Cornwall. So it is something that concerns and affects my constituents substantially, and I'm sure that they will be as pleased to see this measure of progress being made as I am. The honourable gentleman speaking from the opposition front bench made the very fair point that obviously this is just a statutory instrument, but that we do need to look at the whole nature of our consumption as a whole. I think he's right about that. I would add to that wider view the relationship that we have between developed Western countries and developing countries, because so much of these items, when they are put into the waste system, aren't dealt with in this country, they're exported. And effectively, that's where we find it difficult to control what has happened. It's effectively a case of being out of sight and out of mind. And that's why, in fact, I think it is infinitely preferable that we should just cut off their use and supply at source, which is the effect of the regulations that are coming to the House tonight. I would add my voice to those who have made reference to the need for a deposit return scheme. I think it is overdue, and I would like to hear from the Minister, in as far as she is able to, well, remaining within the ambit of this debate, when we might expect to see some concrete proposals in that regard. I know that the Minister herself has a personal and political commitment, so it would be good to hear what we can do to help her push that through government. I think, Madam Deputy Speaker, these regulations are timely in coming to the House. I'm sure we've all noticed that the great progress that we've made with regard to the removal of disposable coffee cups and all the rest of it has rather taken a setback as a consequence of the COVID-19 pandemic. I notice, in fact, that we've got plastic cups back on the table at the front of the House. It may just, I think it's probably a consequence of the concern that people naturally have about transmission. It's no criticism, but it is something that we are going to have to deal with because the pandemic may be with us for months, but the damage that is done by plastic pollution and microplastics then is something which will be with us for decades, if not in fact centuries.
Therese Villas.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise, like others, to support this SI to ban the supply of single-use plastic stirrers, cotton buds and straws. I think the range of exemptions proposed are fair. I also believe that it's reasonable to have postponed implementation so that businesses and local authorities were not having to deal with this in the midst of the pandemic. And like others, I would emphasise that as a modern economy, we will always need single-use plastic. The COVID emergency alone will have seen the use of hundreds of millions of single-use plastic items. But as a society, we need to get much better at treating plastic as a precious resource to be used only when necessary and reused and recycled wherever possible. It's plastic waste which is the problem, not plastic. Plastic as a packaging material is safe, secure, hygienic and cheap. It's also tough and long-lasting, which causes the hugely negative environmental impact when it's not properly disposed of, because it can last centuries in the natural environment. And tackling plastics pollution is one of the defining environmental challenges of our generation. And that's why I welcome the energetic campaign run on this issue by the Daily Mail and by Sky. And I think there is an important place for bans like the one we are considering in these regulations this evening as a part of a wider strategy on addressing plastics pollution, because this regulation is an important means to push producers to switch to more sustainable materials, and as others have pointed out, to push all of us to dispense with items which aren't actually essential. So I would, but it is only going to be effective as part of a wider package. So I would urge the government to maintain progress on extended producer responsibility, as others have done this evening. We also need to see the long-awaited deposit return scheme delivered in accordance with the timetable set by the government. And we also need to ensure that both those schemes operate in a way which minimises costs for business at a time of turbulence in the economy. And I'd also like to ask the Minister when we'll see the carrier bag charge extended to smaller retailers. It will, and I think it is also important to emphasise that domestic action, again, is not going to solve this problem alone. If we are going to address the scourge of plastics pollution in our ocean, then we need to use our aid budget to positively and energetically support the developing world in dealing with their plastic waste responsibly. Significant steps have been made forward through initiatives such as the Commonwealth Clean Ocean Alliance, but addressing this kind of issue should be included in the UN Convention on Biological Diversity and preferably COP26 too. Madam Deputy Speaker, turtles choke on plastics, dolphins can drown if they get tangled up in it, seabirds can inadvertently feed it to the young, and marine life ingests millions of small pieces of it. Plastic is a tremendous asset for our society and our economy, but we must become much more responsible in how we use it because of the terrible harm it can do when thrown away. We must act to prevent the environmental disaster of plastics in our oceans, and I welcome this statutory instrument this evening as a helpful step forward in achieving that goal which we all share. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'd very much like to... actually, first I must welcome the Shadow Minister. I don't believe we've confronted each other yet, but welcome, and I look forward to working with the Shadow Minister on the Environment Bill in particular. And I'd like to thank all other honourable friends and members for joining in this debate today, and I think it just shows how passionate we are about plastic and indeed getting rid of it. I'm just going to address some of the points that were raised, Madam Deputy Speaker. Now, the Shadow Minister, I was slightly disappointed, and he referred to this as a missed opportunity, is highly critical of steps being taken, and yet I believe, honestly, he is not aware, Madam Deputy Speaker, of quite how much is underway, and I look forward to working on the Environment Bill with him and exposing to him just how committed this government is and how much is being done through the Environment Bill and the measures there, but also the Waste and Resources strategy. And obviously we recognise how important this is. I'll just touch on a few of the things that are being done. So we've already, the microbeads and microplastics ban, there's huge reduction in single-use carrier bag usage. We've launched the Commonwealth Clean Ocean Alliance that was referred to just now to stimulate global action, and we are delivering on our promises through the resources and waste strategy and seeking those powers through the Environment Bill. And those powers will charge for single-use plastic items, will introduce the deposit return scheme for drinks containers, and will reform the packaging waste regulations and introduce greater consistency in household and business recycling collections, which I touched on earlier. Very, very briefly, I will...
I really appreciate the mentions of the Environment Bill. Will she ensure we get back into committee? We don't yet have a date for sitting.
Of course, we're well aware of that, and we will be letting him know in due course when it will be back, because of course we're all very keen to get on with it. He's absolutely right about that. The commitment is fully still there. He mentioned about local authorities, because local authorities will inspect the businesses to check that they're following these regulations that we're talking about today. They'll be able to visit shops or stores, make test purchases, speak to staff, demand records, and they will be given the full range of civil sanctions in order to ensure compliance, which does include powers such as being able to issue compliance and stop notices as well as the ability to impose fines. And they will be obliged to publish guidance because they'll be the regulator, and we will give draft guidance before this comes into force. So I hope that clarifies that. He touched on targets, which was a bit naughty, Madam Deputy Speaker, because he moved away from actually the essence of this SI. And I'm surprised he wasn't caught out, but he's new, so being very lenient. Just wanted to reiterate that, that through the Environment Bill, we've got this whole process whereby the targets are set and then checked and then rechecked. We've got the whole system, which I believe is very strong, and we also have milestones in the resource and waste strategy, which sets, for example, setting recycling targets for packaging, and that all packaging will be recyclable by 2025. He mentioned bring back washable cutlery. I think we'd all quite... I washed a spoon today, by the way. I think, maybe we should go down that road. Good suggestion. Now, I'm just going to touch on a few other comments from some other colleagues. My right honourable friend from Chipping Barnet, who, of course, has done so much work on this agenda and fully understands and appreciates how much and how committed this government is to this agenda, and how actually we are introducing this strategy to reduce waste, to recycle, to repair and to reuse. And I reiterate, of course, that all packaging will be recyclable by 2025. She mentioned in particular, though, the carrier bag charge, the extension to the carrier bag charge. We have consulted, as she knows, on extending the charge to all retailers and increasing the minimum charge to 10p, and the government's response will be issued shortly. But of course we have had a slightly different few months than we were expecting with the coronavirus, so we've had to actually allow people doing doorstep deliveries to still use carrier bags as well, but there is a charge still being made in store if one goes in store to do the shopping. But that will be coming forward shortly. I wanted to particularly thank my honourable friend, who's now not in his seat, from St Austell and Newquay. He's not there, is he? No, I shouldn't have. Anyway, I very much thank him for all his work he's done on ocean conservation, and he's absolutely right that these things do affect Cornwall and the wonderful coast there, and he's very passionate about his work. And but he welcomed the regulations, which I'm very pleased about. And he touched on sky lanterns. Sky lanterns actually are regulated by the General Product Safety Regulations 2005, and they're enforced by local authority trading standards. And as such, the local authorities could ban the release of them. I did want to say, though, Madam Deputy Speaker, in this time, sometimes sky lanterns have been let off to thank our workers in the NHS. And whilst I do honestly think we should all be thanking them, I would plead with people perhaps not to let off a sky lantern, because they are a danger to nature and wildlife. And when it's so dry, we've had a lot of wildfires. And finally, the Honourable Member from Orkney and Shetland, I thank him for his support of this, and as on all other environmental issues, I will just remind him this is a devolved issue, in fact. And although you've banned plastics and cotton bloods in Scotland, Scotland haven't yet decided what to do about straws, and we're waiting to hear what they will do. So just to finally sum up, Madam Deputy Speaker, in order for us to leave the environment in a better state than we found it for the next generation, it's essential that we have the right legislation in place that will impact our effect on the natural world. Plastics are causing incontrovertible harm to the marine and terrestrial environment, and we do need to act now. These measures are an important part of our wider strategy to tackle plastic pollution. They'll serve as an important marker that our reliance on single-use plastics must be reduced, and, Madam Deputy Speaker, I commend them to the House.
The question is the motion